Hello and welcome to the Bookcast Club, a podcast for people who love books. And in today's episode, we are going to be talking about our favorite books that we have read so far this year. That's right, we are halfway through 2023, and it's time to have a little bit of a reflection about what we have read. My name is Chris, and I am joining you from Indianapolis.
I'm Sarah, and I'm joining you from the Netherlands.
And I'm Jenny, and I'm coming from the UK.
Now, not to put Jenny on the spot here or anything, but today, incidentally, is the 4th of July that we are recording this on. So, Jenny, would you like to take this opportunity to say happy birthday to America and apologize for your nation's sins against mine?
Oh, Jesus, guys.
Yeah. God bless America, and I apologise about this baked beans situation in the UK.
You should be apologizing for the lack of AC.
Yeah, I was talking if you were talking about baked beans or colonialism then, just at the top of the pod. Jesus Christ.
I think that the baked beans is probably worse than the... No, just teasing.
I had baked beans today, and I thought of you, Chris. And I can't believe you didn't try them when you were here.
I didn't. You know, I kept wanting to do go somewhere for a full English, you know?
Yes.
But nowhere that was around me really was doing it, and then I didn't want to travel for a full English because by that point it's 10 o'clock before you're getting somewhere even, and who wants to sit down to a gigantic meal like that at 10 o'clock in the morning?
And some of them could be rubbish as well, so you'd had to have done your research.
Yeah, so that'll be a next time. That'll definitely be a next time.
Baked beans next time.
But yeah, we are halfway through the years. We're halfway through the year, guys. And how do we feel about our reading so far?
Sarah?
Well, pretty poor. A very poor year. If anyone... Patrons will have heard our most recent Patreon episode, which is, I guess, our June episode, where I talked at length about my atrocious reading year. So yeah, it's been awful, and I'm at peace with that. It's totally fine. So I've only got two favorites to talk about because I've read, I think I've read about a third, maybe a quarter of the books that I would normally read, in a 6-month period. So it's pretty dire straits, but yeah, I really don't care. It's just the season or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, if you're curious to hear me really unpack that in probably more detail than was strictly necessary, I do go into the detail in the Patreon episode.
That was such a good episode though, because I don't know, sometimes when you're in reading slumps like that, you can feel really alone or bad about how you're treating this hobby. And I thought it was a very measured reflection on that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I guess for anyone who didn't hear the episode, it's largely due to my appalling mental health. And so we go into a bit of a detail about that and how weird things happen to you when you're a content creator, which I guess we technically are. Well, we 100% are.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a mindfuck sometimes when you're just trying to live your normal human life. You've got this other thing in the background. Yeah, so if you're interested, check out the Patreon episode. Oh, and I guess we can plug, you can do a free trial at the moment, right, Jen, where you get 7...
Yeah.
What do you
I was
get,
going to say, free for 7 days.
Free for 7
Yeah.
days. So if you want to just hear me whine, that's there.
You weren't whining. I thought you were very measured, and I think it's nice that we share that side of this whole shebang because it's not always easy.
No, it was a great episode. My reading has been kind of mediocre. I've had worse reading years, and I've definitely had better reading years. But going to the UK and seeing all the lovely bookshops that I saw in the UK really kind of reinvigorated my desire to read. I got home and I was like, yes, reading is wonderful. I'm a very consumerist, shallow person. It just takes one pretty bookstore. And I'm like, oh yes, the art of literature, the enlightenment, the enrichment.
Which bookshops did you go to in the end, Chris?
I ended up going to Foyles, which was the most impressive size-wise, which Foyles will come up later. There's something that happened at Foyles that needs to be discussed.
Intrigue.
Yes, stay tuned. I went to Word on the Water, which was gimmicky but cute.
Is that the one on the canal in London?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
yes, it is.
Yep.
I've never been.
I actually went just to rub shoulders, I went with Kate of Book Club Review
Oh,
podcast.
of course
I
you
met her for lunch
did.
last time I was in London, and she
Yes.
brought me there. And then it was quite funny because she's lovely in real life. She's exactly the same off the pod as she is on the pod. And she took me all the way there. Went to what was super hot. And then she was like, "Sorry, I just realised I've walked someone who lives in Amsterdam halfway across London to see one canal boat." It was quite funny. And she was like, I hope you're suitably impressed." I was like, "Oh, I'm very impressed." But it is a really cool bookshop. And I bought
There's a
sorry.
no, you
sorry,
go.
this is now my story. I bought Surviving Autocracy by Masha Gessen, which is about Masha Gessen is a Russian journalist who writes about Putin's rise to power, and in this non-fiction, they're comparing Trump and Putin as leaders. Super interesting. Anyway, sorry, it's not my story. You're telling the story, Chris. Please go.
Well, I was just going to say, near that bookstore was a really nice little pub and restaurant called the Gas Station. Highly recommend buying a book at the canal and then going to the gas station. Then, word on the water, I went to that bookstore in Norwich, which was a really lovely independent bookstore.
Hive.
Yeah, that was a really beautiful store.
Good one.
It was kind of amazing how many books they were able to pack into such a tiny little space, and without making it feel overwhelming. Like whoever organized that really did a standout job. Went to several Waterstones, and I feel like there's more that I'm somehow missing. But yeah, it was really nice.
The bookshop in London is top notch. I love it.
Yeah. I saw the outside of Forbidden Planet, but I didn't go in.
So you didn't get to Daunt or Gaze the Word?
No, I really wanted to. Man, it's hard to get to all the things you want to in London. I mean, it's so huge. Yeah.
Daunt Books is beautiful, and Gaze the Word is amazing, but it is a little bit like further out from where all those ones are. But
so Daunt Books, for anyone who doesn't know, is a bookshop in London that separates all of their stuff by place that it's set or place of the author's from. It's organizes it by place, however that is. So you can go looking for country specific, and they mix their fiction and non-fiction, I think, from memory. I've been there a couple of times. They've got multiple, I think, right, Jen? Don't they? From memory? I don't know why I'm telling this story. I've got all my information is Paul.
James Daunt owns Waterstones, so I think there's definitely more than one Daunt Books as well. Yeah, he's a big wig in the book world.
I will say, I did go to in Daunt Books, they did have Daphne du Maurier under M, which
that drives me nuts.
Yeah, I was like, guys.
Every time I see that, it drives me insane.
Yeah, it hurts you. And Gaze the Word is a queer bookshop, and they sort everything by label. Basically, they just have like a gay shelf, a lesbian shelf, a bisexual shelf. Actually, nice. I don't think they do have a bisexual shelf. It might be pan, but
by erasure.
Maybe I did get a bit sad when I went in there, but yeah, that's a cool shop as well. I'll tell you what they have here, which is really cool. So in the Netherlands, a lot of the bookshops will have, especially independent bookshops, they will have American and US editions of the same book. They get both.
You mean like American and UK?
What did I say?
American and US? Yeah.
Yes, American and UK.
Okay.
So they'll have the edition from the British publisher and the edition from the American publisher. You can choose your fighter, which is really cool.
I like that.
Sometimes there's such a contrast, yeah.
I normally prefer US editions.
What?
Yeah.
I sometimes
I almost always prefer the UK editions, and it was really difficult when I was in the UK and I would go to these bookstores to not purchase books that I either already owned or were available in the US just because I like their covers better. And I was like, you can get this online. It's not that big of a deal, but there were several books where I was like, especially in fantasy books, American fantasy books are wretched covers, wretched. And UK fantasy books are amazing covers, just absolutely amazing. And in the US, it tends to be that they either publish these really big trade paperbacks, they're almost like the size of a textbook, and then mass markets. They don't have like the nice size that the UK has generally, and it drives me up the wall. So there were several, I just like stood in that Waterstones fantasizing about like stealing all these books and taking them home and replacing my editions with these editions.
Anything by Harper Voyager, they really snap when it comes to book covers. Of course, I'm thinking of the Robin Hobb series, but Harper Voyager really snap when it comes to fantasy covers. But some of them, like I'm thinking immediately of Real Life by Brandon Taylor. The US and the UK edition were so different. I've got the orange one, of course, because I hate that black and white one.
That's the American one, right?
I think so. Yeah, the UK one's got these like nice and orangey with a bird in front.
Yeah.
Have you seen the size of Australian paperbacks, like the generic size?
No.
Horrendous. It's like that massive, like a lot of Stephen King books are in that size.
Yes.
Awful. Absolutely horrendous.
That is literally the size of, like, in the US, a lot of the fantasy books, especially from Orbit Books. And what's crazy is that Orbit has UK and US publication. And in the US, they publish the books in these like 8.5 by 11-inch monstrosities. And then you go to the UK and it's like the same cover and everything, just in a normal size. And it's just like, just do that here. Who was asking for this?
It's so big. It's so uncomfortable. Like,
it's so uncomfortable.
Awful.
It drives me mad.
I tell you who's not this. This is now a conversation of whose books covers do I like? Granta.
Oh, gorgeous! Yeah, they do. We promise we're going to get around to our favorite books. We're getting there, guys. Don't worry.
We haven't actually talked for many months.
Yeah.
Especially me and Chris, we've been fighting.
Yeah, we have been. A little bit of a tiff.
We still love you very much, Jen. It's just we've been fighting. No, we haven't been fighting. We just haven't seen each other for months.
Yeah, for a really long time. But yeah, how do we want to do? Who wants to share to start us off on their favorite books? I think maybe Jen should go since she's got honorable mentions, and I didn't do honorable mentions.
Jen's got the size of her arm.
I have a reason for honorable mentions. Okay, I think I've got 3 or 4. Right. Okay, I'm gonna just go in. Do I go in with my favourite of the year so far? Yeah, I'm going to, and Chris can join in with this.
No, not too early.
Too early?
You can't reveal your favourite book 12 minutes.
It's still technically her honorable mention.
No,
I think,
mean,
though.
like,
begins with A. We should have.
Okay.
We should have decided the order. All right, I'm saving it.
At least the faves, surely.
Yeah, save it.
God. 3 of us on this pod, and it's utter chaos. Right? Okay.
Chaos.
All right.
Also, 3 people with very strong opinions. Who starts
3
off with the best
people
one, you weirdo?
with attitude. Right. Let's go with Briefly a Delicious Life by Nell Stevens. I feel like I read this so long ago now, and maybe it wasn't that long ago. March. I feel like I've talked about this on the pod before, and I can't remember if it was on the main pod or not. So this book is historical fiction. It's set in sometime in the 1500s, and we follow a teenage ghost called Blanca, and it, sounds very gimmicky, and I picked the book up based on the cover. It's of a lady with a squishy looking orange in her hand, which for some reason I find alluring, so I picked it up, and then I realised that this book was narrated by a ghost, and I thought, this isn't going to work for me. But I thought it was really great, and for her to have carried that narration all the way through without it becoming a gimmick, I thought was fantastic. So we follow this teenage ghost, and I think she's been around for hundreds of years, but she is following the lives of a lady called George and her family who have moved into this, I think it's set in Mallorca. So they've moved into this village. It's a monastery village, so I think they've moved into the buildings surrounding the monastery, and they're quite an unconventional family. So George has moved there with her lover, who's, I want to say piano player. He's probably a composer. That sounds a lot more grand.
I think it's Chopin.
Yeah, it's a famous one, right?
Yeah.
I've never heard of this guy, so
he's one of
that's my level of understanding.
I think it's Chopin. I think I realised this later because I think sorry, keep going.
No, it's fine. This this
Chopin.
piano player. Anyway, she's moved to this monastery with this very famous composer, and she moves there with her children. She's not married anymore, and that at the time was a very unconventional way to live your life. She dresses very masculine, and Blanca develops this sort of obsession with her. She loves her, basically. So there's sort of this queer element to the book. And whilst following this family story, you also then, it's probably every other chapter, you also find out what happened to Blanca and why she died so young, and you hear about her ancestors. I think there's only like one of her ancestors left in the village, so every now and again she'll visit her ancestors, and she almost sort of protects this family as well. And I just really loved it, and I thought it was really well done for her to carry that through all the way to the end, and for me not to think at any point that was gimmicky, or, you know, sometimes when someone's gone with I'm going to call it a gimmick now, but a gimmick like that, and then you reach a point in the book where you almost notice where they've started to struggle with it. I didn't get that at any point whatsoever, and I thought it ended really well, and it was sad and joyful, and her sense of place is really, really good. So I think at one point, either there's like oranges spilt on the road and they've been squashed by the presumably carts, I was going to say carts, and just I could really picture the smell of them and what it looked like, and the pulp of these oranges on the road. And I think any book with food imagery in it like that I really, really love. So it's a very summery book, I'd say, so one to read now perhaps, but yeah, I really loved it.
Question, do you think, I know we've had this conversation before and I'm so sorry I forgot, do you think I would like it?
I think it's hard to know, because I mean, how much do you like historical fiction?
Well, no, but this sounds interesting to me.
I feel like it's worth a shot.
Because I actually got it out of the library when I was in Australia, because I remember talking to you about it, and then I remember asking you the critical question, do you think I would like it? I couldn't remember the answer.
I think I said yes last time. Okay. And I think if you're going to like a historical fiction, I think this might be it.
Might give the audiobook a go.
Famous composer. I was probably supposed to have been aware of that whilst reading it. However, you don't need to be aware.
I think that's how I think I got it from the library after talking to you about it, and then I think in the blurb it says something about Chopin. I was like, it's weird that Jen didn't mention that.
Sorry, I am.
That's whatever.
Willfully ignorant at times.
Shall I tell you my favorite? One of my favorites.
Least favorite.
It's just.
I think we've established now we're not starting with the favorite.
All right.
This is like the opposite of like.
All right.
Have you seen anything? Read anything?
I will choose then Perfect Golden Circle by Benjamin Myers as the first one that I will reveal. And this is the one where I must talk a little bit about Foyles bookstore, because it's a good thing that I loved this book, because Foyles bookshop ripped me off. I went there, I had cash on hand, actually. I was using card to pay for pretty much everything in London because it's more convenient.
You did
I go there with cash. Yes. I go there with cash, and they were just looking to rip off an American ignorant tourist. And I hand him my £20, and there's a whole bunch of people behind me. It's so busy. It's so massive inside of there. It was the big Foyles. I can't remember what station it's near, but it's humongous.
Tottenham Court Road.
Yes, thank you. And I hand him my £20, and then he hands me back a whole bunch of coins. Now, mind you, I haven't been using cash to pay for much in England this whole time, so I'm not really sure how the money works, and I'm just trusting that somebody working at a bookstore will be, a right honorable gentleman. He was not. He ripped me off very bad. I had less than £1 in change, and the book only cost £8, so this was £20 for this book, so it's a good thing I ended up liking it, because I would have been pissed if I didn't.
Whoa.
So, yeah, it is The Perfect Golden Circle by Benjamin Myers, and it's a really interesting book. It follows two men whose names I've already forgotten. One is called Redbone, I think, and I've forgotten the other man's name. But Redbone is the actual kind of artist of the two, and what they're doing is that they're going around England finding different fields and stuff, and they're making these very elaborate crop circles and designs in the fields. They're very adrift from society. They're very much reclusive. They have this friendship that's only really built on their shared love of making these designs. And what they really like about these designs is the fact that they're building it into the landscape, and the fact that it's temporary, and it causes all this confusion and all these different people. No one really understands why these crop circles are coming up. And the book is structured so that you follow them as each chapter is them making a different crop design, and the chapter titles, are the names of the designs that they're making. And so you follow them, their kind of motivations behind making these designs, why they're doing it, why they've chosen the locations that they've chosen for these designs. And then at the end of the chapter is some sort of press release from the media about the response to these crop circles. And so you're following, this very intimate, claustrophobic relationship between these two men, and then this really kind of giant discussion about what these crop circles are meaning to the wider public, as things kind of get a little bit more dark. And really, they're trying to make this one perfect design that they believe is going to be like the height of beauty. And it's kind of following them as they're trying to achieve this. And it's not very plot focused at all. Not a lot happens. But it's mostly looking at this kind of like desire to feel at one with the history of the landscape around you and all these people that have lived and died, and how that imbues these places with almost this like sense of wonder and magic. And at the same time, looking around at these places now and seeing all this modernity and stuff like that seems to be zapping the landscape of its beauty and mystique, and trying to recapture that through these crop circles. And yeah, it's really interesting. It's also a really interesting look at like masculinity. One of the characters, not Redbone, the other man, he was a veteran of the Falklands War, which I don't know a ton about, but it was really interesting to kind of see how his past and his experiences with war and all this different stuff like played into how he felt about England now. And yeah, it's just a really beautifully written, wonderful book, and I would highly recommend it. And it's really short. You could read it in an afternoon. And yeah, I just thought it was beautiful.
I did not know it was about crop circles.
Yeah.
You've piqued my interest now, because I find crop circles quite fascinating. There's a pub somewhere in the UK that I feel like I'm going to call them the Crop Circle Association. I have no idea. Used to meet at. But yeah, that sounds really good.
It was really, really quite excellent. So I'm excited to read more of his work.
Nearly £20
yeah, I don't think
for it, though.
I think it was £20 for a paperback. It was a bit much.
Chris.
Got right taken advantage of.
I don't know why.
I think it's funny.
We also, when I used to work in retail, depending on how trustworthy you thought the person, the customer was, that then tells you that you shortchanged them, sometimes you'd have to like count the till to make sure.
Yep.
Because people used to try it on.
Yep.
It doesn't happen as much now, because obviously most people, I think, use contactless, which is probably why he didn't give you the right change, because he was probably like, oh, a £20 note, don't see them anymore.
Well, I was so nervous when I was so nervous when I got to the UK that my bank card wouldn't work, and so I immediately went to the ATM to get cash, like just in case I ran it. And then I had like £50 in cash. I was like,
you've got to spend.
well, I need to spend it. Like, it's going to be worth nothing when I get home.
You guys.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to the UK in a few weeks. I don't know if we've mentioned that on the pod.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
You come and stay with me.
Yeah, I'll be hitting Jenny up. She's just getting podcast visitor after podcast visitor.
Yeah.
No, look at us socialising.
So my next one is a bit of a crossover with Jen, and it's one that I wanted to have read by the time the Women's Prize announcement was made, but I did not get it read in time. But I did read it while I was in London at the time of the Women's Prize, which was a really nice read, and that was Black Butterflies by Priscilla Morris, which is following the after effects of the siege of Sarajevo, and it's following a woman who is a famous artist, landscape artist in Sarajevo. When the siege breaks out, her husband and her mother end up escaping Sarajevo to go to the UK to be with their daughter who lives there. But she doesn't make it out in time. She decides that she wants to stay behind, be the one that kind of stays behind in Sarajevo and watch over the houses and stuff like that. And you follow just like, what is it, a 2-month period of time as the things get really, really desperate in Sarajevo. People are starving, people are being killed every single day. She is not safe, and she develops this very intimate relationship with one of her neighbors who owns a bookshop. And it's not a very plot-heavy book. It's really just looking at this very intimate relationship that builds up. What happens when a war like this breaks out and suddenly people that you were close to, had relationships with, felt some sort of sense of community, are suddenly on opposite sides of a battle. not knowing the boundaries anymore, what's safe to do, what's not safe to do, all of that being upended in just a very short period of time. And it's beautifully written. Priscilla Morris does not read like a debut novelist at all. It feels very accomplished, very sure. I felt when I was reading that book that I was in really safe hands, which is just quite unusual to feel with a debut novelist. And I loved it. I loved every single page of it. I just thought it was I was sobbing. I was truly, truly sobbing. It was a very evocative, emotional, upsetting reading experience.
I'm really glad you enjoyed it. Sometimes you doubt yourself when you say something's really good. I don't know. It's maybe I've not got who I think should win right. But yeah, I really loved it. I cry at the drop of a hat, right, in real life. If somebody cries, I'll cry. I'll cry at a concert. Like, I probably cried at your clips from your Hans Zimmer concert, Chris. I'll just cry because I'm in awe of something. Books don't make me cry. I don't know why. It's almost like I can't evoke the emotion that I can visually. I don't know, but this book made me
I'm
cry.
the same, actually, Jen, if that makes you feel like...
Oh really?
Music.
It's so funny. I can never explain it.
Music, the tiniest bit of a show, like films, if I see people that looking happy, sometimes
happy, sad.
But book never. So I think it must be a visual and sound thing or something. I think audiobooks are more likely. In fact, I know I've cried definitely more frequently with audiobooks.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, because I did listen to this, so maybe that's part of it. But yeah, I just thought the whole thing is beautiful, and it's quite short. So I think it's probably not even 300 pages long, and I feel like it's only set over a few weeks, like from her decided she's going to stay to the war really ramping up and her very quickly becoming in a lot of danger. I mean, half of their building gets blown up. Like, I think they walk into her friend's flat and like the whole of the wall is missing and the water gets shut off and all that kind of stuff, and then they're queuing for the water and there'll be a dead body in the street that lots of people are just stepping over. So I just thought it was amazing how she did it in such a short time frame. I think I remember saying in our Women's Prize episode that I wish it was longer, but almost on reflection, I don't know. I almost feel like it was perfect. And
yeah, same. It's such a sharp like pang in your side when you read it. It's such a it's a gut punch, and it's really just so well done. It's just so well done. I think her family, I know, was affected by the war. So the book has some impact from her own family history, some inspiration there. But actually, I think she went out and like interviewed a whole bunch of people and had all these sit-down conversations with them about their experiences in Sarajevo during the siege. And they gave her all this like first-hand experiences. And I think that was where a lot of it came from. And you really feel that. Like, you really feel like you're walking in the streets of Sarajevo. You're seeing all this kind of horror and calamity and disgust kind of around you, and having to like reconcile like the fact that what you're seeing is also your home, like those two things in your mind. And it's just really so hauntingly done in the book.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, and it made me cry twice. There's one bit in it that is just particularly sad and harrowing, but then the title Black Butterflies comes from, I think it's the town hall that's burning, isn't it?
It was something that had a library in it.
Yeah, I think it was the town hall, the equivalent of a town hall anyway, and the library is burning, and the black butterflies are the bits of the books, the pages that are like fluttering down, and even that imagery made me cry, and that never happens when I'm reading. So there was something about it that I thought was brilliant.
Really, really well done. Can't wait to see what she does next.
This is where we pop a little ad break in to tell you about all the different ways you can support the pod, most of which are totally free. A really effective and easy way of showing your support is by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. There is a link in the show notes that will take you straight to the Apple Podcast page where you can write a review. If you listen on Spotify, you can also very easily give us a star rating. You can also share our posts on social media. We are at Bookcast Club on Instagram, Twitter and TikTok. You can sign up to our free monthly newsletter on Substack, where we share even more book recommendations, our pick of the new releases, and all the latest podcast news. But the best way for us to find new listeners is by you telling your book-loving friends and family about us. If you want to support the podcast financially, we do have a Patreon account. You can sign up for as little as £2 a month. We offer early access to the podcast, a close friends feed on Instagram, monthly bonus episodes, and our top tier will get you all of the above and personalised book recommendations. We get you to fill in a survey and then we tailor our book recommendations to your preferences. We will also send you books in the post. There are over 20 bonus episodes you can get instant access to if you sign up as a patron today. We now also offer a 7-day free trial with our bonus tier. The link is in our show notes. But however you choose to show your support, we as always want to say a huge thank you. We appreciate each and every one of our listeners.
My first one is Cursed Bread by Sophie Mackintosh.
Oh, yeah.
Which we did a whole Patreon episode on, me and Chris. I think it was a May episode where we read that together and discussed. This is based on a true story. It's in the 40s? I can't even remember. What decade was this?
I think it was the 50s.
The 50s. The 1950s, this is. In France, where a whole village of people is essentially, there's a mass poisoning that occurs. So this is a true event, and Sophie Mackintosh is sort of retelling this story, fictionalized version of this story, which is about how this mass poisoning actually occurred, and it's set around basically a new couple who come into the town, and particularly it's about the wife of this couple, and it's about the wife's relationship with the baker and the baker's wife, or the baker and his wife. She's also a baker, but and it's basically about the relationship between these two women. I absolutely loved it. I'd read a bit of Sophie Mackintosh before. I read The Water Cure and really enjoyed it, but this was just like, I just found it absolutely delicious is the word I want to use. It was like slow paced, quite plotless, even though there is this obviously like key point of a mass poisoning taking place. The actual stuff that's happening in the book is pretty implied. It's mostly about how these women are sort of talking and not talking to each other. They become quite obsessed with each other, especially the baker's wife becomes very obsessed with this kind of new woman. And it's mostly this kind of like yearning where she just becomes obsessed with this woman and what she's doing. And it's slow and delicious. I just want to use the word delicious again. Is that an appropriate word? I don't know. But I absolutely loved it.
Also, it has some of the best steamy scenes ever in fiction. But what's so great about them is that like it's steamy without necessarily it even involving that much sex. Like it's just so erotically charged in the writing.
Yeah, it really is.
That you just like, she'll describe like bread and like people working with dough and you're like, oh, is it hot in here? Like it's just you know, like it's so good.
The baker's wife is quite obsessed with what this woman eats, and particularly, and like whether or not she will eat. And so there are these scenes where she's like watching her eat bread, which is just like it's it's something.
It's so good. It's so good.
I had a really funny conversation with my friend Anna about it, and I was just telling her how I was like, this is basically a fiction book about two women massively overthinking every aspect of their relationship, and particularly one woman obsessing about whether or not this other woman is going to eat the bread that she made, how much is she going to eat, if she has a mouthful, what does it mean? And Anna goes, now this is representation. Finally.
Love it.
True sapphic yearning in fiction form.
I loved too, the other thing I loved about that book was the structure it was told in, because like you would get you knew that there had been some sort of catastrophic event. It doesn't tell you initially that it was a poisoning, but there was some catastrophic event in this town, and you know that the baker's wife like no longer lives there, and you follow her life now as she lives in like some hotel away from that town. And then like those passages back and forth between her life now post poisoning and like the pre-poisoning build-up, the way it's structured is so good. Like I found both storylines so gripping.
Yep.
And I never was reading one thinking, oh, I wish we'd get back to the poisoning or blah blah blah. Like it was always just so on, like felt like I was reading on the edge of my seat, even though like you said there's not a ton of plot.
No, I have so much respect for books that are kind of like how done it, or like as opposed to what actually happened. Like I'm actually of course, I'm really rereading The Secret History at the moment, which is obviously like the prime example of this. But like when you know what happened from the beginning, and the author is able to hold your attention without any suspense of the end of the plot, very impressive.
Yeah.
And yeah, this was great.
Should have made the shortlist. Honestly, I think if it was up against, I think it should have won.
It's funny because I haven't seen. It's not like super well loved.
I know,
seen,
and it's
which
crazy
I just
to
think
me.
is weird. Yeah,
it better be longlisted for the Booker.
I reckon she's been longlisted for the book before. The Water Cure got longlisted, so she's probably got more of. I think it's more Bookery than Women's Prizey, but yeah, it hasn't. Yeah, from the people that I follow that read.
I know a lot of people don't like it. They're so wrong.
And I can't really understand the critiques, to be honest.
I don't either. Every time I listen to it, I'm like, oh, okay. All right, my next one is The Prestige by Christopher Priest. So this book came out, I think, in 1995.
I've got something to tell you.
Me?
My brain just makes me, I've got to interrupt. So guess.
Okay.
Guess who is in the Waffle House, which I pointed out to you in Norwich the other day?
Who?
Well, you're talking about The Prestige, and they made it into a film, and I'm pretty sure he was in it.
Was it? Wait.
I hope he was in it.
Was it Christian Bale?
No, not that one.
Hugh Jackman.
Well, hey, yeah. Hugh Jackman
was
in the Waffle House in Norwich, this week.
Really? Oh,
cool.
The way I would have let him know.
Shared his waffle.
My availability. Yeah.
There you go. Carry on.
Okay, so The Prestige by Christopher Priest. So I had seen the film growing up, so I kind of knew the big twist. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, I highly recommend watching the movie. And I really think that you could either read the book first and then go watch the movie, or watch the movie and then go read the book. I think you're going to get different things out of either experiences. Have you never seen the movie?
No, you're not going to spoil it, are you?
Oh, no. Okay, no, I'm not going to spoil it. So you've never seen the movie, though?
No.
Oh, it's such an amazing movie. It's honestly my favorite of Christopher Nolan's films. The book opens up and you're set in the modern day, and you're following this guy who is a journalist, and he is on his way because he's heard this rumor of a story of some cult where the leader of this cult has claimed that he can like bilocate and be in two different places at once. He gets to this cult compound, and none of the members are willing to talk to him. And we know that this claim has been substantiated because this dude has been seen at the hospital room of one of his members' births, and while at the same time that he's incarcerated in San Francisco. So we know that for the first time there has been proof that this man has done this, but nobody is willing to talk about it. So finally he decides, like, you've led me on this like wild fucking goose chase. I'm going to go talk to the woman that has sent me this information. He goes and meets her, and she's actually the owner of the land where this cult has its compound. And she tells him, yeah, it was a bit of a wild goose chase I sent you on, but it's important because I needed to bring you out here because I know your real name isn't what your real name is. Your real name is Nick Borden, and I met you when you were a really young child. And do you think that you have a twin? And this sends him spiraling because his whole life he has known in his soul that he has a twin out there, that he has a twin, that it lives and breathes. He can sometimes hear this twin talking to him, and this woman claims that, she knows that he has a twin. And from there, the book has very little to do with what I just said. From there, you then follow these two journals of these two men in the late 19th century that were dueling magicians that had this big rivalry. One of them is named Alfred Borden. He is the more like technically astute of the magicians, and he gets in this big rivalry with this guy whose name I've already forgotten. Rupert Angier, because Angier at the beginning of his career was doing seances where he was pretending that he could commune with the dead and bring comfort to people who had just lost loved ones. And Borden was pissed off because he felt like he was manipulating the kind of art of illusion to bring this false hope and comfort to people, and taking advantage of people in their grief. And so one day he decides that he's going to expose this man for what he's doing, and that sets off their like big rivalry that then goes on for decades, where there's these tit for tat disruptions at their events and stuff like that. And at the center of this rivalry is the fact that Borden can do this illusion that Angier cannot figure out. And what this illusion is that he brings out 2 cabinets onto the stage. Borden steps through one cabinet, closes the door, and then out he steps immediately from the cabinet on the other end of the stage. And it's called the New Transported Man, and absolutely nobody can figure out how he is pulling off this illusion. And Angier starts to get more and more and more desperate to try and prove that he can pull off this illusion as well. And you get these 2 journals side by side discussing these events from 2 different perspectives. It's fucking brilliant. The writing is unbelievable. It's so tinged with that kind of gothic air. It feels like it has, it was inspired by things like Frankenstein. It's a lot about what happens when we kind of keep part of ourselves hidden, which I'm trying to be really couch my language here because I don't want to give too much away about the actual plot, but that's what it's about. It's about what happens when you do that. Which of these 2 men has made a bigger sacrifice for the prestige, which is the moment at which the audience thinks that the rules of the natural world have been bent before their eyes. Which one of them has sacrificed more? Were these sacrifices worth it? And then how have the sacrifices that these men have made in order to pull off these tricks and illusions, how has it trickled down through the generations of their family with this big framing narrative going on? It's unbelievable, and it's not that long of a book. Like, the fact that it pulls off this like incredible epic storytelling in just like 350 pages.
This
Unbelievable.
Really good.
And it's funny. It's so funny and dark and creepy and just everything you want in a novel.
Yeah, this sounds
you
really
make me
good.
want to read it. I don't think I realised it was a book.
Yeah, have you seen the movie, Sarah?
No, I haven't.
Oh,
But
it's such a good movie.
I might watch it because I'm a film person now. See our latest Patreon episode. This sounds really good. This is weirdly reminding me of the plot of the Night Circus, which is a much later fantasy novel. Because have you read the Night Circus?
I have, yeah.
Christoph?
I have not, no.
So the Night Circus itself is a competition between 2 magicians, and they're basically trying to one-up each other. And so it's a traveling circus, but the whole circus is basically a ruse to see how they have to make all these different tents and to see who can make like the best attraction, basically. And the whole book is about this competition between these 2 magicians. And the way that you're describing it, it sounds like I wonder if she drew like heavily from this, because I think she wrote that. I want to say the Night Circus came out 2007, something like that, and this is 95. So,
2006 is when the movie came out. So,
God, is it that old?
I know it is, isn't it?
God.
Crazy.
Yeah. So So are you saying she didn't even read this book? She just watched the film.
I'm just like it was a very it was a really zeitgeisty movie because there were 2 movies that came out right at the same time that had very similar premises. It was The Prestige and then The Illusionist. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And it had Henry Norton, and it was a very similar concept about these kind of dueling magicians. And then we never really got another dueling magician film after that. But it was like kind of a really zeitgeisty thing in like 2006, 2007, those movies.
Yeah, this sounds really good.
It's so good. It is one of the most pleasurable reading experiences I have had in a really long time. Just like sentence by sentence, funny. I wrote like a whole review of it in the newsletter because I was just so excited about it.
Which I've not published yet.
Oh, right. I just had a panic. I was like, I don't remember that. Thought I was paying attention.
I've got it. Like, we're just building up anticipation for the newsletter release. It's going to go out in the next one. But yeah, Chris has written a very good review of it.
Are you going to read The Night Circus, Chris, is the real question.
Yeah, I actually own it.
No, it's rubbish. Don't read it.
It's not rubbish.
It's
the
rubbish.
Starless Sea is rubbish, I thought.
It's bloated nonsense.
It's very yeah. Well, if Jenny's saying this and she can send Maggie O'Farrell, maybe Chris is going to hate it.
Oh, that's true.
Oh, honestly, Chris, I really don't think you like it. Don't put yourself through it.
I'd be surprised if you liked it. But,
well, it's not like a super high priority, but I will get to it eventually.
I read it when it was like big.
Oh, the big buzzy booktube book, yeah.
Like when it 15,
like 2015,
10,
2016, yeah.
Lord,
don't say that.
Sorry.
That makes me feel old.
So it's got kind of a special place in my heart because I loved it. And it's a standalone fantasy,
Yeah.
Standalone fantasy is always anyway, I don't know if I read it for the first time now if I would adore it, but it's just kind of fun. It's also a little bit, yeah, whatever. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to take over this discussion with an adjacent book. But that does sound really good. So, what is my favorite? My favorite book so far this year is Happening by Ernaux, which was actually Belle, who is a patron of the pod and has been on a couple of times. She gave me this book actually when I was in Melbourne earlier this year, which is where she lives. She gave me a copy of it. So thanks, Belle. Happening is a memoir of Annie Ernaux, which is about her trying to get an abortion in the 60s, actually. Super short, it's like 110 pages, and it's her recounting a time in her life when she was pregnant and she was desperately trying to get an abortion. And she just talks about how that was. And it is beautifully written. It's mostly about her emotions and how she's actually feeling at the time. And she also talks about, because she's writing it basically in the present day, she talks about how this has affected her for the rest of her life, and how things that were happening to her in that time and things that people said to her and the experiences that she had to go through, how that affects her even today as a much, much older woman. And I just loved it. First of all, of course, it's Annie Ernaux. It's beautifully written. It's translated from the French, but it's just, I hadn't read something before that sort of just focused in so much detail on abortion, not as a sort of healthcare issue and like the logistics of how we should actually be allowing people to have abortions if they want, but actually on the emotional side of it. And even if someone is, she 100% knows that she wants to get an abortion, she definitely wants it, and the complexities of how that actually affects her emotionally. It was just, I loved it. It's just beautiful. A lot of things I hadn't thought about. I haven't like been through that experience myself, and I actually don't really know anyone who has been through that kind of experience. Really, I live in a very different world to the one that she was living in the 60s, and it's even like she knows that she has the means to get one basically, but it's still the difficulty of actually getting it was just really interesting to read and really, really important, I think. And she talks about how she has to sort of like go and ask people that she knows will do them in some cases, and then they sort of have to have this like side conversation, and then she has to try and get prescriptions from doctors that are for things that sort of on paper are okay, but she's trying to get this other thing. And yeah, it was all just like really, really interesting, and I think a really important read, actually.
And what was it called? Happening,
yeah.
She won the Nobel Prize, I think, for literature.
She did.
Yeah. And I've not read any of her books. Isn't that a complete
No, I haven't
waste?
Either.
Yeah, I think I've only read... Yeah, I think I've only read... Maybe even that one. I've got a vague memory of reading something else, but this is definitely a good one to start, I would say, because it's about her. I think it's really interesting to read when you have such a big writer, a big important writer. I think it's really interesting to read something that's about them, like, so personally. It's so personal. It's so short. Like, it's great.
My final book is The North Water by Ian McGuire. It is set in the late 1800s, and it is following a whaling expedition at a time when the whaling industry is actually kind of declining because they've actually overfished these whales and overhunted them, and so it's not really as lucrative anymore to be hunting for their oil, their fat. But there's one more whaling mission going on, and you know that aboard this whaling mission is a man named Henry Drax. The very opening chapter is told from his perspective, and he is pure evil. The very opening chapter is his perspective as he rapes and kills a young boy in town before going on this mission. Aboard as well on this ship is a man named Patrick Sumner. He is a veteran of the war, and he is telling everybody that he's actually expects to be inheriting some money in Ireland, but he needs to take a year off before he can actually be legally eligible to get this money. So in the meantime, he's going to go aboard this whaling expedition and serve as their surgeon. And it's while he's on board that he discovers that a rape has happened to one of the young servants on the ship, and he instantly suspects that Henry Drax is responsible, and then the young boy who was raped is quickly killed. And so it's this big cat and mouse game aboard the ship while in these Arctic waters, completely claustrophobic between these two men. It's a really defiant stare into pure evil, why do people do the things they do? What happens when somebody just decides to live moment to moment with absolutely no care in the world in regards to how their actions affect other people, or have any type of guiltiness or conscience or anything. And it's this look at this just horrendous evil, while at the same time having such a gripping, pacey story as Sumner tries to get to the bottom of who is responsible for this evil aboard the ship, all in the, this atmosphere that does not care about them, that has absolutely no regard to their well-being in the environment around them. And it's shocking and gripping and so excitingly written. It's unputdownable and so smart, just razor sharp.
I bought this after you spoke about it previously.
Yeah.
Have you watched the TV series yet?
No, but I'm really excited to. It is plotty. It is one of the, probably of all the books I've mentioned, it is the most kind of boom, boom, pacey, action, crazy stuff happening as you're reading. And at the same time, it feels really thoughtful and meditative and contemplative and, a very upsetting, disturbing, will not get out of your head read.
Yeah, God, to me it sounds just grim.
It is grim. It is really grim, but it's really good. It's really, really excellent. I was looking up quotes from the novel. This is, I believe, Henry Drax talking. It says, "It is not a sin," he tells himself. "There is no sin left now. There is only the blood and the water and the ice. There is only life and death and the gray-green spaces in between. He will not die," he tells himself. "Not now, not ever. When he is thirsty, he will drink his own blood. When he is hungry, he will eat his own flesh. He will grow enormous from the feasting. He will expand to fill the empty sky."
God, it sounds, beautifully written, but it just sounds like a really...
It's dark.
version of Moby Dick.
It did make me want to read Moby Dick, actually, as we're reading it. I'm sure, because I haven't read Moby Dick, and I know very little about Moby Dick outside of, whales. So I'm sure that if I had read Moby Dick prior to reading this, there'd probably be a lot more, literary heritage to kind of trace there.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't read Moby Dick either, but I was going to say, apparently it's good. We know it's good. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's one of those like Crime and Punishment or Anna Karenina, of course, where people are like, oh, it's actually really good. Yeah, there's good and good with classics, right? There's good in quotation marks, or there's oh, great read, actually.
Yeah. How enjoyable is it for a modern audience?
Yeah, I can't, I'll be honest with you, Chris, I can't be convinced about that one. But I'm really glad you enjoy it. I support you.
We'll see what Jen thinks of it after she reads it.
I think I'd enjoy it.
I think you will too.
I'll try and get to it. Yeah, no, definitely. So, my favourite book of the year so far is Annihilation. Shocker. So
I forgot I read that this year. That probably would have been on my list, but I forgot I read it.
So I basically I don't really use Goodreads anymore, but on Storygraph, I've given it a 4.75, which is probably as high as you're going to get out of me on Storygraph. I can't imagine a situation in the way that I use the rating system on there that you would get a 5. So I just loved it. Me and Chris read this for a Patreon episode where we were comparing the book to the movie. It's almost a shame that that episode didn't make the main pod, and I think we'll do more of them because we both really enjoy the process. It does, however, mean that I might get some of the plot mixed up when I try and explain what the book is about. So the book is essentially about a group of, I believe, 5 women who are sent into Area X, which is this closed off area that's been closed for years, and I think perhaps they're the 12th expedition to have been sent in, and previous expeditions have not ended well, let's put it that way. Our main character, who I think is nameless, she's not got a name in the book, has she, Chris? This is what happens to you because we watched the film and she has a name in the film.
No, she is nameless in the book.
She's a nameless narrator in the book, and she has gone into Area X because her husband... Did he go missing? He comes back in the film. I don't think he comes back in the book.
I don't think so either. I think in the book he doesn't come back,
So she's gone into Area X because her husband previously had and hadn't returned. Remind me of her role, Chris. What is her job in this little...
She was the biologist. Yes.
So she's the biologist.
This is a great summary, Jen.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. It's so honestly, the episode we did was confusing as well because
it's the book and
so
the movie
similar,
are very
but
different.
then,
It's very similar. Yeah.
Yeah, at the same time. So there's a biologist, which is our narrators, an anthropologist, a psychologist, and a surveyor, and they've gone in to continue mapping Area X, and you don't really know what's happened within this area. You just know that these expeditions have come back and there is no human life in there anymore. It's just a really beautiful book. It's not very long. It's almost the perfect blend of any book I've ever read. So it's beautiful, it's creepy, it's clever, it's macabre, it's like philosophical. It was just perfect, and I've never read a book like that.
It's so exciting. Like, when you're reading it, you're so excited to discover more about Area X, and also like be so confused by it. Like,
and so
it's
scared
unbelievable.
By it. Yeah, it's such a well realized place. So I mean, talked about setting earlier, but it's just so well realized. And there's a whole section where they have found, we had this conversation, a tunnel. Do you want to call it a tunnel? But this kind of almost this like endless spiraling tunnel that they start going down, and there's words written in almost like a fungus or some sort of plant on the wall. And as they go down, it's revealing more and more of this kind of quite strange, almost biblical message, and it gets more and more almost. Because I think this book's classified as horror. I know the film certainly is, but it's not overtly horrific. But it just gets more and more creepy the more they all get sucked into Area X. And she's getting more and more sucked into it to the point that she's accepting of being sucked into it. And it's just... I don't read a huge amount of sci-fi, but I just thought it was perfect. And it's part of a trilogy, which I am intrigued to read the rest. Whether I'll ever get round to it, I don't know, but I really loved it.
It's so good, and it's so good too because I think my favorite aspect of that book is that the biologist is written from her perspective in these journals entries, and she is an unreliable narrator, not because she wants to lie to you or she has something to hide, but because she does not know what she does not know. She does not know who might even be controlling her. She does not know what her motivations are. Like, her mind gets so twisted in this place. And it's so interesting to read from the perspective of somebody whose like entire like life mission and reason for being as a biologist is to understand the world around them, understand the environment around them. And she's set into this environment, Area X, which it seems to be fighting back. Like it seems like its purpose is to confound the observer. Like, it wants to confuse you, it wants to play tricks on you, and seeing that interplay is so cool throughout the book.
Yeah, it happens really early on, but part of it when they go into this sort of spiraling tower, and she's trying to read this writing or at least take samples from it, the spores go up her nose, and it happens really early on, so already immediately you know, and she knows that something's going to go awry because she feels she's been infected. They know what's happened to people previously, and she's keeping secrets from everyone, but then is she starting to lose her mind? Like, is she starting to become part of this Area X? So it's so well done. I can't believe it came out of somebody's brain. Yeah,
it's amazing. It's an amazing book.
Yeah, I just put it on hold at my library. I forgot that.
You'll love it.
Yeah, I think I'm excited for it. It's also, I really want to see the film. I've actually watched the film trailer. It's on Netflix, actually. It's on my Netflix anyway.
Yes, it's on Netflix. It's I mean, we both enjoyed the film. I've seen it before. It does a good job of realising Area X, actually, like depicting what it might look like. Some of the more horror elements of the book are quite scary in the film.
Yeah.
Is my warning.
Is that a warning,
Sarah?
It's pretty scary. There's a scene in it that I won't spoil for you, Sarah, but it involves a bear. Genuinely the most terrified I have ever been in my entire life watching a movie. I was about to piss myself.
Don't say that.
It's a really good movie, though.
I'm such a baby when it comes to like suspense and stuff in like shows. Even Supernatural is honestly too much for me.
Yeah, skip
You
the
know
bit with
it's
the bear.
coming if it helps. You can
Yeah.
skip forward.
Yeah, that sounds really good, and I love that you loved it so much, Jen, because it's so like
I didn't expect
Do
to
you
love it.
ever read science fiction? No, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
rarely. I've read
Yeah.
a handful.
Have you told Ben to read it? Your other half? Because he
No,
loves sci-fi, right?
I should. However, I know he will have seen the film, and he's very reluctant. If I've seen the film and know the plot, he doesn't really want to read
Yeah,
the
but the
book.
plot's so different in the book.
It is, and so much
It's really
better.
so different. Yeah,
So
don't tell
much
him.
better. I will. I'll tell him to
Mention it.
read it. Shall I do some honourable mentions? I'm just gonna
Yeah, that's right. You forgot you had honorable
only
mentions.
quickly, because a few of the Women's Prize books were kind of at the top of my list, and I didn't want to talk about them again because me and Chris have only just talked about them in detail. So the ones that I really enjoyed were The Marriage Portrait by Mackie Farrell, Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, and then I'm gonna give an honourable mention to bloody Vladimir, which wasn't on the Women's Prize shortlist.
Oh, I want to read this.
Honestly, I have not stopped thinking about this bloody book. So Vladimir by Julia May Jonas, which I talked about with Alice in the last episode.
Yeah.
It was honestly, I thought it was going to be favourite book of the year until the very last few pages, but if I discount the ending, honestly, I haven't stopped thinking about it. It's about a middle-aged woman who's a teacher. What are they called in universities? They're not called teachers.
Professor?
Lecturer, that's the one I was going to use. Who's a lecturer in a university, and she is taken with Vladimir, who's like a new young lecturer. She has an open relationship with her husband, who's also a lecturer at the university, but what pans out through the book, which you think is going to be about her obsession with Vladimir and getting into Vladimir's pants, is not that at all, and it becomes more Vladimir's the tool to like reflect on her relationship with her husband and her life and how she interacts with people in general. It gets a little bit Misery, Stephen King's Misery, and I just really loved it, and it was so perfectly done until the ending that honestly I cannot believe the ending is what was chosen. It blew my mind. It's so well done until the end.
It has a proper sexy cover.
Yeah.
It's the US edition. Yeah.
It's got a very like old-fashioned, like old school.
I think Alice called it a manscaped chest.
Yeah.
So this is, can I just to read, this is Vladimir by Julia May Jonas, because when I type it into my library app, there's loads of books about Putin that come up first.
Not that Vladimir. Not
the
his
hot
manscaped
fictional
chest.
One. No, so like as you describe it, it does sound like this legitimately could be Putin. Like, oh, this is just a shirtless chest.
Shirtless. But part of what I love about it is that she has this like intense obsession with Vladimir, and once she gets to the point where her and Vladimir come together, he really gives you the ick. And I just thought, it's so well done. It's so well done. And if you can read it up until the last 20 pages and then just stop, that's a 5-star read. So that is my final.
I don't know what the
honourable
ending is.
mention.
I'm more intrigued about the last 20 pages than the first, 280.
I can't talk about it. Please read it so we can talk about it.
All right.
Is it time to bring this show to an end?
Yeah, we better plug we've actually been plugging it throughout, but if you want to support the pod, we do have a Patreon account, as we have weirdly just mentioned often. We don't normally do that, but I think we've been doing some good content on the old.
Yeah, I've been very impressed by these Patreon episodes, and not to it's really good. And now I've been tooting my own horns because the best ones have been the ones I'm not on.
Yeah, I think we've been doing some good work over on Patreon.
Yeah.
So we do one bonus episode a month. So if you really like listening to us, you can hear 3 episodes from us a month instead of 2. And then there's multiple tiers, so go and have a look on Patreon if you would like. And also rate. I'm just doing a really casual ad. I hope that's fine. And
Go
also
for
rate
it.
and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. That really helps people find this show, and we really appreciate it. And talk to us on social media. We love that. Share our shit.
Yes.
Comment on our stuff. Send us DMs. Slide into our DMs. We really love that.
We reply to all of them.
Yeah, we do.
Yes.
And we love. Sometimes we get really nice messages from you guys, the listeners, about episodes that you have just gotten to that are like that you've really enjoyed. We get some really nice messages about the grief episode, for example. So, get involved. We love it.
Yeah.
Great ad,
And,
Sarah.
Fantastic.
Well, and Sarah.
And I believe the next episode of the podcast is going to be the most culturally significant podcast episode maybe ever, because we'll be reading my favorite books. So you guys have that to look forward to. And of course, I have impeccable taste, so it's going to be wonderful.
Cultural reset.
Yeah.
I did tell the patrons what they are in case they wanted to get involved.
Yeah, nice.
Shall we
I
tell
saw
these
that.
lads?
Yeah, let's let the public know the two favorites.
So we're going to be. I don't know. You say, Chris. It's your moment.
Okay, the two favorite books that I've chosen are Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West by Gregory McGuire, and Self-Portrait with Boy by Rachel Lyon. Boom, boom, boom. How exciting.
Self-Portrait with Boy, I can reveal, is I've read a little bit of it. It's really good.
It's so
No,
good.
so exciting. And I'm halfway through Wicked, which is not what I expected.
Yep, it's very different, isn't it?
Curious about Wicked. Cool.
All right. Well, thank you guys
All right,
very
then,
much.
Peach.
We look forward to seeing you guys again. Bye.
Thank you for listening. Goodbye.